What Steve doesn't know is that Steve's going to be hosting the whole thing. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes. We pretty much got the whole damn crew tonight. Chuck Manley, Kayleen Williams, Lauren Moore, Scott Moon, and Steve Beaulieu is joining us tonight. We are talking about action scenes and writing them. It's season 3, episode 48. I don't know if I already said that or not. I've got disturbed in my headphones. Hold on, I got to shut that off because I'm going to be like, badly. There we go. Yeah. That's much better.
We should do a scene where we talk about how, like, you're trying to talk on your mic, but nobody can hear you because it's really quiet. And then we all try to correct you, and it could be like this whole action sequence.
At least it didn't happen like mid-show like it happened the last time.
I think it'd be great if it did.
Because I was listening to that show on the audio feed later, and I was like, Scott was right. You really couldn't hear me. And then all of a sudden, click, and I'm just yelling at everyone. So I apologize for all of that in advance.
That scene and the whole dialogue thing was like, after like 5 of us in a row, you're like, you really can't hear me? Yeah, no, we're all telling you. I don't believe you.
It's a conspiracy.
You people are telling the truth.
I think there's some kind of error with the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
why?
Nobody's.
I had to reload it.
Is it working?
I don't know. I just put the link in the Facebook group.
Let me go back to it and reload the link.
I see it. It's watching. I can see it on YouTube right now. I'm like looking at me, looking at Lauren.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's saying there's. Hang on a second.
Error occurred. Please try again later.
Yeah, it's saying
got it. Same thing.
An error.
That right there.
I have it going on my tablet, but it's not playing on my computer.
It shows me the same thing. It shows me
that's
that
There are 7 people watching now, though. They're all watching this error.
What? 7 people are watching the error.
Hi, everyone.
Try reloading.
It's gonna be
try reloading because it's working for me anyway. Let's keep going because it's working.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just reloaded it and it worked.
No, mine doesn't work.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the cluster of Keystroke Medium, and we're destroying YouTube right now. So sorry about that.
I like it. We're going live, but really, it's just going nowhere. And we're talking to ourselves. So we're talking about action scenes tonight, but before we get into that, let's go around the room and figure out what we've been going on, what we've been doing this week, rather. And I'm going to put Kayleen on the spot because I want to. Go, Kayleen. What you been up to?
I have been outlining my next series. But fun part, I have outlined about 5 different series. And in this one, I've actually merged 2 of those. So I'm having 3 stories that I'm combining into one. So I'm super excited.
Oh, very nice. What made you want to combine all of them?
On the latest one that I wanted to run with soonest, there's this part that just was not working. It was just very dull, boring, and didn't make sense for where she was going from one part to the next. But if I added this other storyline, it tied it in. Very cool. Did that is that like quadrupling or tripling the size of your book, or are you just smashing everything into a regular length novel? It's it'll actually make it easier to push it out to a 4-book series. Right on. Because I'll be able to have at least 2 perspectives going. So one side of the world I'll start with, and then it will introduce the second part. And then it won't be until much later that you actually get more of the info on the part that I just sort of like touched on in the beginning. Very cool. Who wants to go next, Chuck? Super secret project, sorry. Oh. That I'm super excited about. Secret. Yes, and everybody of the Keystroke fam, essentially you guys, minus Chuck and Ralph since they won't be there, will know what it is. I'm really excited. But that's all I'm saying.
We love super secret projects. It's always a better.
It's been a long time since we had like a really like a long running super secret project.
Well, speaking as one of the poor souls that won't be there, I'm thinking a Facebook live reveal live from Vegas is probably in order. Yes.
Maybe we should just leave Chuck in the dark. What do you think?
Super secret Facebook Live Chuck in the Dark reveal video.
Yeah. Go ahead. Beat up on the old guy.
He's not here to defend himself. That's what we'll do. I'm gonna get Chuck tattooed on his picture of his face tattooed right here.
No, what you need to do is take the little comic things that he does in the company chat, and then get that.
My little Bitmoji.
Yeah.
Yes, get the Bitmoji that Jeff says on the
emoji is what we call it.
I'll find a really good one for you, Scott, and I'll send it to you.
That could be dangerous. Well, what you been up to, man? Anything fun?
Excuse me. Besides choking on my vodka tonic, I have been, let's see, still clicking away on the Cordova Pursuit, Race Cordova Book 3. My narrator is done with Cordova Vector as far as recording goes, and it's with the audio engineer guy right now, making sure all the pops, clicks, and things like that are cleaned up out of it, and we should be ready to get the files up to ACX in the next day or two. And this morning I sent him the audio script on a short story for the Cordova Incursion, which is the second book in the Brace Cordova series. So he's going to get started on that. My audiobook for Master of Hounds is clicking right along. The poor guy got sick, so it slowed him down a little bit. And that's, and I believe I actually sent Steve here as a story not too long ago, just out of the blue.
This Steve, yeah, for the supers.
Yeah. So he just put out a message saying he needed some filler material, and I just happened to have one laying around. I don't even know if he used it or not. I just sent it to him.
He probably didn't.
It's in the to be edited file, so we'll see.
But yeah, that and some live stuff, and that's pretty much what I've been up to.
Sweet. Kayleen, you want to go next? Or Lauren? I'm sorry. Yeah, do it twice,
again, Kayleen.
Yeah,
we're going to give you notes, and we want you to reperform.
Yeah, don't argue, just do it.
Well, I just finished the first draft of my first novel. It's the first in a three-book series. Yeah. Woo-hoo! I got to revise it. Got a lot of work to do there. And I'm working on a collaboration with a friend. She's helping me co-write it, and it's going good. It's been exciting. Got a couple books I'm editing. One's a memoir. It's a line edit. And the other is a military science fiction novel, which is just amazing. It's a really, really fun ride.
Awesome.
I always wonder when you're editing a book, do you enjoy it while you're editing it?
No.
Or
wait, I'm sorry.
Well,
I always wondered about that. Like sometimes when I read a book, I if I read it critically, I'm like, oh, that sucks. Then I get done and I'm like, oh, it was horrible because there was parts that I didn't like. But how do you feel about it while you're going through and changing things?
Well, when it's a line edit or a developmental edit, it's kind of fun because you're watching the book progress or evolve as you go through. So it's neat to be part of the team and neat to be part of that process. But with this book in particular, I'm proofreading. The book's already gone through another editor. It's quite good, and it's a lot of fun. I'm just sitting back, reading it, enjoying it, and fixing things along the way.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a curveball and have Steve go next. For everybody that don't know, this is Steve Beaulieu. He's been on the show before as a guest. He designed our wicked cool-ass show logo back there. He's also done several anthologies, published one of my horrendous short stories, and we're going to be working on a collaborative epic fantasy project maybe sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure when we're going to get to it. But I extended him an invitation to come and hang out with us tonight, and hopefully some other shows to get him on and as a co-host, because he likes to talk and I like to listen to him. So what we like to do, Steve, is talk about what we got going on this week in our writing careers or whatnot. And so anything interesting going on with you?
Well, because it's epic fantasy that you and I are going to be working on, we're on the George R.R. Martin release schedule. So we've got all the time in the world
here.
Oh, you what? Oh, hey, hold on. He said
we're on a first name basis with George, so we just say George.
Georgie. I call him Georgie. Every now and then, Georgie Martin. He's a good guy. I've been working on a ton of crap, man. You and I have talked a bunch about it, so you'll be bored throughout the process. But this past week, Luke Daniels finished up the Buried Goddess saga, the first 3 books in narration. So that's in like post-production and all of that. And Oliver Wyman, I just spoke with Oliver. He finished up Haley's narration.
Oh, he's one of
Very
my
cool.
favorites.
He's man. This so I don't know. I guess I need to say this. So Rhett C. Bruno and I started a publishing house about 6 months ago, and it's been a hell of a ride so far. But Haley Stone is one of the authors that we signed, and she's got a book coming out called "Make Me No Grave," and Oliver Wyman is doing the narration. And man, this has to be one of the best books I've ever read in my whole life. And it's weird, man. It's a weird book. It's a weird. She calls it a weird fantasy western, I think is what she calls it, and it's basically shotguns and magic.
Yeah, weird western.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's super
Fun
cool,
genre,
man.
man.
It's really good. I enjoyed reading it and editing it. So I guess I lied. I guess if it's a good book, yes, you love editing it.
Ah, see.
Your gut reaction, you know.
Yeah, and anyone who's listening whose books I've edited, yours were amazing too. So yes. So we've been finishing up that stuff. I got my maps back my map, I should say, back for the Buried Goddess Saga today. And I could just show it off because man, is it fantastic! Is that in the shop? Oh, it's so gorgeous! I just love every second of it.
Maps are the best thing.
So
Really are.
I love maps.
it's been nonstop, man. Just one thing after another. I don't even know how to keep track of the different projects, especially when I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's just like it's
Did your
crazy.
1-year-old run into walls? Because somebody else's I know could just happens to go straight into.
Oh my God.
My 1-year-old yesterday, there was a glass door, and of course everyone's got this story, but apparently, she crawled up to it and she looked at it and like acknowledged that it was a glass door in front of her, and then just boop right into it. So that's what I get. You still do it? You're like, I think I can make it through this.
Yeah. But I only do if I'm holding a cup of coffee and like 7 books in one hand, and then
And you're right into the screen door.
Yep. Right.
So that's been my week. Yep.
Well, I'll go last, and Scott, since you were drinking water, I'll let you go next.
Okay, good deal. See that? Yeah, I did that. I baited you in. It's like I'm not really drinking the water. He'll think
I was trying to catch him off guard. It didn't work.
know how you roll like that. So I finished the final revision of the Westfield Line story for my fantasy story lately, which ties into some other fantasy stuff I want to do. I had massive sugar roller coasters this month. I think I literally ate. I didn't run into food I didn't eat today or this week. It was like watching a train wreck. It was the most horrific thing you've ever seen. I mean, like I went and what did I do? I decided the other day that I'd been eating ice cream. I'd go to Brahms and I'd get a bacon double cheeseburger and fries, right? Which I don't normally eat. But then while I was waiting, I thought I should have a double scoop ice cream cone. So I'd sit there in the drive-thru eating the ice cream cone, and I'd eat the bacon double cheeseburger. But then I decided I'm going to be good. So I just had 2 bacon double cheeseburgers. And then I go back and take it. And I get out, and one of our coworkers, Ninestead, he says, "Hey, man, you want to go to lunch?" I'm like, "Sure, man. Let's go to lunch." I'm horrible. But I'll do like a 24-hour fast and then eat like 14,000 calories in 2 meals. But I don't know how I got onto that. That's basically what I did this week is eat. It's great. I had a good time like that. So let's see what else. Went on a trip to Kansas City. That was fun.
You threw hatchets.
I threw hatchets.
That is fun, isn't it?
Did the hatchet throwing. I would be throwing hatchets right now if I could figure out a way to do it, not getting in trouble with the better half.
And I made a fun joke to you, and you just totally blew it off, ignored it. It was great, man. It was fantastic. You're like, man,
that wasn't good.
You're like, man, I would love to have a hatchet laying in my house. I'm like, yeah, that'd be amazing for like 6 months, and then like, you'd forget about it for another 6. It doesn't matter. It was not a funny joke anymore, freaking jerk.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm a little slow sometimes on the joking. Unless it's like a hatchet, it hits me like right there. I don't always get it. So it's what's the old joke that say an Englishman laughs once because he never gets it, and a Frenchman laughs twice. Once when they hear the joke and once when they pretend to get it. And an American never laughs at all because they heard that joke a long time ago.
I don't even know why I'm laughing.
I'll tell it again on the next podcast.
My joke was better, just for the record. It was way better than that.
No, because when he's telling this joke, the only thing that pops into my head is we're talking to PP Corcoran like 2 years ago, and he's talking about putting these chips in his head, and here comes Scott. I'm like, oh, that'd be great for Pokemon Go, and I'm like, what are you talking about, Pokemon Go?
In my defense, I was trying to. Never mind. Well, he was getting so serious, and I was like, well, you really need to take this a different direction right there. So, yeah.
I spent my week tearing apart. Before you
get started, can you loan me $20? Just give me $10 now, and then $10 next week, and then I'll owe you 10, and you owe me 10, and we can call it even.
Okay. I got it. I mean, I'll loan it to you. I'm not sure that the math works out the way you think it works out.
I'm going to shut up for the rest of the show. Go ahead.
No, I didn't get a lot of writing done this week because I was taking apart a $500,000 robot, which was a lot funner than it sounds. And it took us like 2 days to take apart this robot. If you got a minute, Google F6B bomb robot, and you'll see that it's just a massive piece of equipment, and it's what we drive remotely to either destroy packages or investigate or whatever. Anyway, every year you've got to take it down to it's nuts and bolts and its gears, and then put it back together. And there's probably like 200 or 300 screws probably that you've got to pull. It's just a huge, crazy mess. And so I got nothing to. Scott found it and he's screen sharing. There you go. Yeah, there you go. I don't know why it says, should the police have a robot suicide? I'm not sure why it says that. But yes, that is the F6B robot. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, mine says first use of a lethal robot by U.S. police.
Yeah, but fun fact that was
got a machine gun on it. Is that what?
No, it does have a shotgun on it. It does not have a machine gun.
I get that.
Hey, if you keep clicking, you'll find one where they blame Trump for it. I bet it'll happen. just keep looking; it'll happen eventually.
True. They will find one. Well, the robot will build the next wall. So I took apart that and put it back together, and I was in Kansas City as well, and spent too much money at David Bunster's. But then I got back and realized that I didn't do any writing while I was on my training trip. And so there's 4 huge red circles on my writing calendar for this month. And I should have been editing Terranova 3, which I'm very, very close. I'm like 2 scenes away from finishing the rewrite on Terranova 3. So hopefully I can finish that this week and move on to the rest of the edits, and then move on to Edge of Valor.
Yes,
Edge of Valor.
You just made me check my Excel sheet, and I haven't written in 10 days. So,
oh man,
sucks, man.
I didn't figure out until October. I'm gonna do so. Here, check this out. I have it up, so I'll share it with you guys while we're doing screen shares, because this is pretty interesting to me. So here is my Excel spreadsheet for the year.
God, that's detailed and color coded.
Well, see, so that's the thing. This is what I realized this morning. So the red are days that I did.
Nauseatingly organized.
So I make a new spreadsheet every day.
Yeah. So the right are the total project numbers, like the individual projects, and I can go and look and see I've got days and average word counts that I need to finish to get those projects done. Most of those projects aren't being written on right now, but I've got the total up in the corner. So I've written 223,339 or 349 words this year. My goal, I'm not even halfway to my goal, but that was a pretty lofty goal for me.
July wasn't a good month for you. I'm sorry, man.
July was a horrible month for me. But I realized in October, that I should. It's color coded, yes. So the green is days that I was editing a manuscript. So the green in January is I forget what it is, but the green in some of the red and the green in February. So this red shouldn't be red; it should be green.
What is red? You didn't, right?
Yeah. So actually, this should be green. So that is editing Terra Nova 2.
Whoa! We could just take days that we didn't write and make believe we were editing. Just turn them green, just like that.
Yeah. Those should be green.
This is going to be riveting on the audio.
Yeah. But I figured out today. That yes, it is color coded, but I'm going to do even more color coded next year, because next year I'm going to color code by project, and so then I can just look at the project and see which colors they are and see how much time I put into each project for the year.
For thinking about writing.
Ooh, that's like all of this is like that. All of it would be filled
every day.
It should be like plaid.
Ooh, I think can I do plaid in Excel? Because if I can do plaid, I want to do plaid.
Definitely do.
Hey, before we get into talking about the topic, I really wanted to mention, and Bard's here, so that's good. So Luke T. Barnett released his book today. He is going to be a show sponsor, but we're actually going to use him to sponsor the show next week. I just wanted to talk about it because I took a screenshot. He got a 5-star review on his first book. It's one of the ones that we looked at when we were doing a critique, and this was back a couple months ago. We did a critique on it. And he took a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but some of the suggestions that we put into, that we talked about during that show.
Is it the half orc?
Yeah, well, yeah. That's the same author. This is a different story. This is a novella. This is Cryos and Jade, and he got a 5-star review on it. And the 5-star review says, excellent storyline, plot, and characters. Can't wait to read the next installment. This novella offers all that I could ask for, from intrigue, adventure, and a nail-biting story. A must-read, and that's from Miles Cohen. So congrats to Luke for the first 5-star review and publishing the novella. I also want to, I think one of the things we talked about on this story was a lot of some of the placement of the ideas and the thoughts that he had for the story. Specifically, Ictus the Black, we talked about, where he starts his story and it's all about her and then not being in love with somebody else or whatever, right? And it kind of goes back and forth, and we had kind of a long discussion about that. Well, so he changed the story, and the story of the start of his novella starts like this. Ictus the Black, the dread of Thorol Island, was dead. That's what Jade told herself, standing before the black walls of his abandoned keep. So, like, very cool opening, very neat. It grabs you guys and just says, read this because it's exciting and nice and so very good, Luke. I bought it. Luke.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read it. It's not the show sponsor, which we'll get to here in a little while, but it'll be a show sponsor here probably next week, and we'll talk about it more then. But I just wanted to bring it up since he got a 5-star review today. So,
and bravo. Luke, to answer your question from the poll, it was bourbon and bad decisions. That was that's how you get manly chest hair.
Oh God, that's a huge, great segue into writing action scenes. So,
bourbon and bad decisions. I've had a few action scenes because of that. Yeah.
What do you guys think? To start off this discussion, what do you guys think are some of the, like, your eye rolling, like, it's this kind of action scene? What are the action scenes that you can't stand or that you don't like reading?
Are we allowed to do this?
Yes.
I think the guest should go first.
Oh, who's that?
Steve, you go first.
I don't know. I tend to hate the guy running through an alley being shot at. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I feel like I read that in just about every book. Every gun toting book. It seems like it's a lot of words where nothing happens. And so I don't know. That's my start. I could start there. I could go deeper, but I'll start there and I'll see if anyone else sparks anything.
You hate it? Do you not like it just because it's kind of cliche and it's done?
It's just super cliche. Yeah. To me, it seems like today, especially in the stages that we're in indie writing, everyone thinks we got to jump right into the action. I'm a slow burn type of guy. I love a slow burn in a book. I don't need action to get excited at the beginning of a book. I just want really good characters. And when I open up a book and the first thing I see is somebody running away from somebody while they're getting shot at, I think, first of all, I don't care if this guy gets shot and killed to begin with because I don't know who he is. Yeah. But it just seems like the more and more I read, the more that cliche keeps popping up. And I'm a reader. I think I've read like 115 books this year, and I would say 20 of them have that scene in it.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the go-tos because I think a lot of writers think, okay, my guy's getting shot at. He doesn't want, what would be a heroic thing to do? Well, run down an alley where they're the only target, And I think a lot of people just sort of default to that, but a lot of people doing that turns it into a cliche. So,
well, and to me, I read it and I go, I live in Texas, man. We all shoot guns here. And if you can't hit a dude running down an alley, you shouldn't be shooting your gun to begin with. And then as the story goes on, you find out that this dude that's been shooting is like this badass that totally should have shot and killed this guy to begin with. And so like I always go back to those moments and I go, okay, am I ruining a character by setting this up in the first place? I don't like a Mary Sue. I don't like a main character that can just do anything. He's amazing at everything, but at the same time, your villain has to matter as well. Even the henchman. If the henchman can't shoot you while you're running down an alley, then you got to recreate your henchman.
I agree with that. So they're not like the stormtrooper type,
right?
That shoots and doesn't hit anything.
Basically, we're talking about an action scene with no context, no connection to the characters, and no reason to care about the action.
Another one for that in that same realm is like the really big wars. There's either one person or a few people. They're fighting this big giant army. You have no idea who they are, what's going on, and it just keeps going for like pages of this battle where you're
just action for action's sake.
Yeah, you have no context to who's really important, why they're fighting. I don't particularly care for that.
So how do we fix that? Well, what do you got? Like, think of the good ones that you've read that like I can think of a couple, but you guys will hate me and then you'll laugh at me when I start talking about them. So
no, let's hear it.
Then by all means,
Brandon Sanderson.
Gosh, who invited this guy on the show?
Yeah, but okay, so the guy that you and I could go to, R.A. Salvatore, writes these phenomenal action sequences where plot points take place during his battles. I think about Drizzt and Artemis Entreri fighting back and forth. Yeah. And they're talking the whole time. And the story is progressing the entire time. And I think that's how you write a good action scene, is that it's not just action for action's sake, but something imperative is happening during the time that the action is happening.
Right. Or the action itself is the outcome of the action is a major turning point. Like there's real stakes involved.
Right.
I mean, that's
right.
Because,
like you want, like you don't want to have like you don't want to write the action scene just for the sake of having an action scene, because like you go to an action movie to see Jackie Chan beat up a whole bunch of people, but that's not why you read a book. There has you can only read he threw a right punch and then he roundhouse kicked somebody in the face so many times before you're like, let me just get to the end and see who won, because probably it's going to be the main character that won the fight, right? So like what I like about Sanderson, what he does.
I love Sanderson.
Normally in his fights, you'll see something that there's usually two things that happen: something that moves the plot forward significantly, or it moves the character forward significantly. One of those two things usually happen if he has a big fight scene. And some of his fight scenes last a long time. Like some of his fight scenes, like the end of Oathbringer, lasts a long time, the battle. But then you have the battle with Dalinar and his son versus the Fiend. The what's it called? Now I can't think of the. Anyway, it's a big crab-like beast that crawls out of the. I can't, for some reason the name's skipping me, but Dalinar and his son and this hunting party is out there, and they are hunting this beast. They start fighting it, and a whole bunch of things go on in the scene. Well, that scene, you learn about the shard blade. You learn about you learn about how it takes 10 heartbeats to summon it. You learn about all this other stuff, but you also learn that somebody's trying to kill Dalinar because the strap breaks on his seat. And then you learn about the heart inside the beast, that's what everybody's trying to do. That's like very valuable, right? So there's like three things that you've got in that fight scene that you're reading this fight scene, and it's not just for the sake of having a fight scene. I love that
action and world building kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the good ways to kind of deliver, instead of the info dump, you tie it to like a fight scene or an argument or some sort of tension, and you tie the information to that. And that's one of the ways you can parse it out over the course of a book rather than just going all over the page.
Right. Hey, can anybody else think of a good example of a fight scene that they've read recently? And Lauren, in the military sci-fi book that you're reading. No spoilers.
Reading a lot of Galaxy's Edge right now.
Yeah.
Reading a lot of Galaxy's Edge right now, and their fight scenes are excellent. One of the reasons why I like them so much is because they have diverse different kinds of fight scenes throughout. You've got the military ship battles. You've got one-on-one as the troops maybe take a ship. Some of the battles are fought in the planets themselves between the aliens and stuff. So they're always mixing up the different kinds of action scenes that you have. You're not seeing the same kind of scene repeated again and again and again. So I was trying to think of examples of more action scenes that I've read recently, and I really couldn't think of any because I've been in the Galaxy's Edge world for so long.
That's a really good point, though. They talked about, like, if it was in the Story Grid or another book I read recently, but it talked about you can't repeat things. So if you have a gunfight in an alley, you can't really have another gunfight in an alley. You can't have if the guy wins the gunfight by doing a fancy quick draw, then he can't win the next one by fancy quick draw. You have to mix it up because that's been done. And I think that a good way to make a fight scene interesting is to put the characters in like a moral dilemma or some sort of crisis.
Right.
Like where, you can save your best friend or you can save your son, who's in this together. And so then not only does it matter, but it's kind of like the best of two bad choices.
Right.
However that works. Irreconcilable goods.
Yeah.
You win, but you still lose, and it just makes the fight scene matter more if there's more than just, more like a sports team. Hey, look, we won. And nobody dies.
So I'm curious, Steve, and you mentioned it when you were talking about it, the running and gunning in an alley and having a lot of words and then nothing happens. And Lauren, maybe you can chime in on this too, coming from a military sci-fi point or perspective. But military sci-fi gun battles are pretty much a staple of that genre, right? You're going to have it. Either it's going to be ships shooting at each other or space marines duking it out with blasters or whatever. So how do you go about crafting one of those scenes it's fun and interesting and you're like go, but it's also not as repetitive? Because it's like military sci-fi, you're going to get it, right? Or it's like romance, they're going to fall in love at the end. But how do you make that scene interesting enough to read and not just skip through to see who dies?
Well, in Galaxy's Edge, they have characters that are really different personalities. different kinds of humor coming through, different kinds of personal struggles that they have. And the plot lines are really thoughtful. They've obviously taken a lot of time ahead of time plotting out this book, plotting out the multiple plot lines for the whole series and then for each individual novel too. So that's going to make each scene different. And they won't be stuck in a trap where they're showing the same kinds of ship scenes again and again and again. Or, busting into yet another ship, killing more people, going down corridor after corridor and shooting people up.
You raise the stakes. So like speaking of Galaxy Dead, you have Legionnaire, the first book. So they get in the first battle and it's basically an ambush, kind of like with some tanks. And they get ambushed and you're revealed, like Josh said, you're revealed that the point or this officer nobody likes is a coward and gets his people killed. And it sets up that inner conflict and those things go on. But then the next battle is now their unit's been wiped out, but also their base has been wiped out. So the stakes escalate, and you realize that their support ship is gone, but not everybody knows that. And so it gets more complex.
Right.
It gets worse and worse.
As it gets more complex, the span of what the reader can see and understand about the world kind of grows naturally too. So you're in that one location and you only know that little bit about the main cast of characters, and then you're introduced to the alien world. But as the conflict broadens, so does your understanding of the universe broadens too. And at the same time, they're introducing you to these interesting characters that all have their own weaknesses, and it kind of interacts with the plot. So yeah, that thoughtfulness is what's going to make a book work.
I think the other way you make action work is you have R.C. Bray narrate it.
I was going to say that. I'm only going to say that.
Lauren said something that is absolutely, for me, paramount, and that's having weaknesses. And so often you read, military sci-fi, any fantasy, epic fantasy where the characters have no weaknesses. You're never really concerned about whether or not they're going to die. They can't die. They're just, who cares if they're in another battle? Maybe they'll get cut and then somebody will magically heal them and everything will be all better again. Having weaknesses is vital to the whole process. I think that Scott and Josh, you guys could probably attest to this. I mean, like, people don't just go balls out, like shooting guns and running around and like there's gunfire everywhere. Like, you're not just going to run out into the middle of it. You're not going to trust some overturned couch to block the gunfire. When I see those things, I'm like, bullets go through stuff.
Yes. I love
like bulletproof cushion.
Like office settings where they like just throw the partition down, the little cubicle thing down, and I'm like, dude, he's gonna light you up right through that thing.
I like when different characters react differently to the gunfights. Like, not everyone is going to respond to a gunfight the exact same way. It's very easy for me to tell when an author is writing how he would do it, and he does that with every character, or she does that with every character, opposed to, like Lauren said with the Galaxy's Edge guys, they all have different personalities and they all attack different scenarios differently.
Usually I'm nervous to have editors that I know read my stuff, and I'm super nervous for Lauren to read my Galaxy's Edge book, because she's read all of them, and so she'll get to mine and she's like, this shit, and just throw it right out of the thing.
I felt she just did a short story for me, and I felt the same way when I sent it to her. I'm like, oh, she's not gonna like me anymore.
I'm sorry, we can't be friends anymore.
We can't be friends. No more.
Writing is too bad. Yeah. So
go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say the other thing. So I say two things. One is, like in reacting to those gunfights, a lot of times people react to those really traumatic situations. They don't react at all. So because a lot of times, like, people, they scream or they run or they shoot back, but a lot of times people are locked up, and they can go through about half of the gunfight or the fist fight or the car wreck, not really knowing what's going on until, there's definitely some time lag in depending on how much realism you want to have. But also then with all of your heroes being invincible, I also am really annoyed with, and it's really prevalent in fantasy, is the heroes or heroines are completely incapable of anything. And you're like, there's no way, because a lot of times they're kids. And, and they take a 6-year-old kid and they throw them into these battles and they're going to save the world. I'm like, or these characters that can't do anything. And it's just, it strains my credibility that they go from being completely helpless, non-decision making, basically no moral stance on anything, to saving the world by the end. And I find that a little bit annoying too. Is
did you read Wheel of Time also?
and about 1,000 others like it. So that's a really prevalent one. Anyway. So
I'm still trying to slog through book 2, like every couple of weeks.
Just quit it, man.
Or like should I do one more hour?
I think I made it through 4 of them before I just threw my hands up and was like,
we had a podcast that we couldn't even finish.
Or like
we committed to a podcast. People were listening. We had thousands of listeners, and we're like, "This sucks. We're done."
You had a lot of people with a lot of hate there.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of hate for that, didn't you?
Yeah.
I got called a sexist.
We are.
That never happened.
Well, yeah, but
that checks out.
I'm messing with you.
So I wrote a note down here that I want to talk about, but really quick, I want to hit the show sponsors so we don't forget like we do. This week's show sponsor is Fire at Will by Christian Kallias. It's a new series. It's the book 1 of the Far Behind series. It's a space opera adventure with lit RPG elements. I'm really curious about that smashing of genres. Here's the blurb. The galaxy's in big trouble, and it's up to Kevin, his dog Boomer, and a quirky talking cat to save the day. What could possibly go wrong? Which I think is also Scott's mantra. What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong?
After saving the Arcadian Confederate from certain destruction, Kevin's consciousness is cast back to Earth. Victory is sweet, but life on Earth is boring. It doesn't take long for him to start missing his galaxy-trotting adventures. But you should be careful what you wish for. When a Kregan operative bent on revenge shows up to hunt Kevin down, everything starts to unravel. The galaxy's in grave danger, and it looks like Kevin's the only one who can save it. Not to worry, the Arcadians have sent their best engineer to help Kevin in his quest, who also happens to be a talking cat with a less than ideal attitude. If Kevin can't whip his motley crew into shape, the galaxy is doomed, which means Earth is doomed. And as boring as it is, Kevin's starting to realize there's no place like home. That didn't work out as well as I thought it was going to, but
he's kind of doomish.
Yes. So Fire at Will by Christian Kallias. It's out now. It's 99 cents for, I think, like 4 more days. So I'm going to put the link in the live chat. It's also in the show notes. Go pick it up.
Christian did donated covers and stuff for some of our other charity events too.
That's right. He did covers for a cure. What did we do? Let's see. We did on his covers and some editing packages. We did $2,200 this year for covers for a cure. So
yay.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
All right, so we've talked about what we hate in action scenes and what we don't like. So let's talk about what does work, and let's also talk about Scott was saying he hated the nobody to big damn hero thing that you see in like epic fantasy and stuff, but how much of that is a trope of the genre?
Right. True.
Like if you're writing two-fisted pulp adventure, there's a certain kind of action that's expected.
Right.
As opposed to writing a realistic military thriller kind of thing.
Right. And you have,
what's good isn't necessarily an individual objective thing. It's going to be a sliding scale depending on what the reader's looking for. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah. What I would say is, like I love Ender's Game and some things like that. So I'm not totally against the everyman protagonist and stuff. I just don't like when it's a mindless choice. you know, and people just assume you start you know, your characters, whatever they are, whether they start weak or start stronger, or whether they're ex-special forces or whether they're accountant down the street, there has to be a reason for it in the story. And
so like Arya starts out and she does not know how to kill anyone.
Yeah, but years go by for her. I mean, she learns.
Right, but there's a obvious level of progression there, and I think what Scott's trying to say is some people come into these books with a teenager who gets drafted into the military, and then 2 months later he's a assassin going to kill an emperor somewhere. Like,
think about,
or they find some elf stones and they can blow up, you know, countrysides.
Arya is an 11-year-old girl that is definitely in peril, but she's very strong on the inside, and she immediately starts making decisions. She takes control of her inner world very early. She just has no physical ability to carry that stuff out, and so you're constantly thinking she's going to die. But, you know, and then she stabs that guard, and then she's doing all these things. And so I think that's a good example of the weak character done well.
But there's something that, like, so with Arya, with Game of Thrones in general, with it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where I feel like to a point where we're okay with the slow burn. The reason that Arya works is because, like Chuck said, years have gone by during the time when she's progressing. I think Chuck said that.
I did.
But when we try to go from, as Josh is talking about, like this dude, like at the start of the book, he's a complete tool, can't do anything at all, and by the end of the book, he just saved the world. Like, I can't buy into that. It doesn't happen. It's like you'd be dead at this moment. And like, but George R.R. Martin, yeah, he takes forever to write a book, but man, he takes his time, and he's not afraid to kill people. So you legitimately worry if Arya is going to live or die. I love killing my characters. It's my favorite part about my books. Just killing people. Like, oh, you love this guy, now he's dead.
Okay, so let's say you've got the hopeless everyman. Oh, let's say you've got Frodo, and he suddenly got the fucking ring, and he's got to go take to the mountain. So he gets a whole team of badasses to go with him. But ultimately, it's still up to him to get to the mountain. Is that an example of what you're talking about, where the nobody saves the world, or does the fact that he got some people to back him up change the dynamic?
I think with Frodo though, Frodo, it doesn't take any level of expertise to throw a ring into a volcano.
He still fucked it up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's still
right.
Yeah.
But his character, all he needed was strength of will. He didn't need anything else. All he needed was the will to do it. Right.
You're right. It's really easy to walk from like the Shire to Mount Doom. It's super easy to walk through all that, right? I mean, that's not hard at all, right?
No
skill taken.
Stroll into Mordor.
Right.
So easy. Stupid Frodo. Anyone could have done it.
Sam was way better.
Yeah. And, you know, Sam made Frodo more interesting to me because their friendship was.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I have a confession to make. I haven't ever read the books. I've just watched the movies.
So a lot of what I'm kind of hearing as far as a commonality is you need to have a strong character base. They need to have some sort of personality and depth, and the action that's going on around them is going to happen, but the perception of that action is going to change depending on every character that you have around it. So, you know, one character who is the badass, but, you know, constantly has to stop to go pee because he has a bad bladder, is going to change the action for the person who is crying all the time, but is shakily holding the gun and managed, you know, to shoot one bad guy in the head or whatever it happens to be. But that dynamic is stronger for the action based on the characters themselves.
Right. I mean, and I think that's a solid rule for writing and storytelling, period. Until you establish at least one character that the reader gives a shit about, anything else you write is pointless.
Yep.
Because they don't have anybody to latch onto or a burning question that's going to pull them further into the book. Because getting through a novel is always about the question. They want to know how what the answer is to, how are they going to save the world? Who is the killer? Will the guy and the gal get together in the end? Whatever genre you're writing in, you have to establish that question and give the reader somebody to care about. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels, and they're going to give up on you by chapter 3.
Josh, what's the best part about Tyrion Lannister?
Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
He doesn't read books. We need to make sure he knows which actor played
right
a particular character.
For me though, it's his way to basically give people the finger and not actually give them the finger, and
how to say screw you as diplomatically as possible.
Right. But he does. I mean, everybody is kind of weaving their own web of deception and lies to forward themselves through this thing. But he has to navigate all of that and then some. And I don't think that Tyrion ever fights. I can't. He does in the Battle of the Blackwater. He does. He kind of does.
Yeah. And he gets screwed pretty bad.
And he gets horribly screwed. But he that is a great version element to bring into an action scene, because action scene doesn't necessarily have to be a gun battle or a sword battle. It could be a battle of conversation, of wits going back and forth. Georgie does this extremely well.
Georgie M.
With the Tyrion character, where Tyrion is exceedingly smart and can match wits with just about anybody, except for maybe his. Well, no, he outsmarted his dad too.
Yeah, he shot him on the toilet. If you forgot that part, it's pretty messed up.
There's some westerns I think where people.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had written down, one of my notes earlier, is when it comes to action scenes, I think some people get kind of really deep into the weeds of, like, he punched him with his right hand and lashed out with his left foot and tripped him. One of the action scenes that I actually really love, and it sticks with me, isn't really a scene. It's the idea of the scene, and what I'm talking about is the Gunslinger by Stephen King. And when Roland is shooting, you don't really get a lot of he pointed his gun at such and such and pulled the trigger. You get a lot of the fingers did their work, and he repeats that almost
because everybody knows what a gunfight looks like.
Right. And so what he does is he illustrates different things about that fight, and it's very poetic in the fact that the scene that I'm thinking of is in the first book when he goes what is that town that he's visiting, when everybody turns against him and he's having to fight off all these people, and he still has both hands, spoilers, and he's reloading his revolvers, and you come back to, and their fingers did their work, and it's like a building type of melody as that scene just progresses and becomes more intense, and you can see the whole thing in your head, just him just bam 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 shooting, but he never says he extended his right hand out, pulled the trigger, there's recoil, or he extended his left hand out, pulled the trigger, and there's recoil. Doesn't ever actually say that. And so sometimes I think when you're writing an action scene, like they say, less is more, but for the action scene, if you can illustrate what is going on without actually saying point by point what is going on, you're probably going to have a better reader experience, because the reader can already, when you read, like everybody knows this, when you read, your mind illustrates it for you. So I don't need every little
thing to be box you in. And I think going directly on with what you're saying is one way that makes that easier to do what you're talking about is to narrow down your cast of characters that you're directly dealing with. Because I've had this issue. I've written several things with like a squad of like 5 or 6 people. Well, it's hard to keep track of the different characters without giving some of those specifics. Like, he drew his gun and fired. he pulled out his hammer and hit, and you wind up getting all those beats, but you have to do that to know to switch characters. And so maybe if you had a scene that focused just on one character or two characters.
Yeah, I think the best action sequences, no matter what's going on around them, I think you probably need to stick to one point of view character and just say he fired his weapon as an explosion went off over there, to sort of like make the reader aware that yes, the rest of the squad is engaging the enemy around you, but I'm focused on this bad guy. You see what I'm saying? And that kind of helps the reader. Often don't know what's going on around you if you're focused on something like that right in front of you.
I was just gonna say, I think Dresden. If you read Dresden, Dresden's got some of the best action sequences in the history of writing, and it's all first person. Yeah. And he's brilliant. Absolutely, Jim Butcher is brilliant. What do you? Yeah,
because a lot of times with Dresden, it's like why is he hiding? The fight's over, and he's just like, I looked over and Thomas was laying on the ground. I don't know how that happened. You know, I was too busy with these 30 vampires over here.
Yeah.
I've never read Dresden Files.
Oh, you just need to, man. Hey, can I be a villain? Can I be a villain for a second?
Do it.
Am I allowed? I'm a guest, so I'm supposed to be a villain, right? So you said you were talking about how he extended his left hand, shot, recoiled, extends right hand, all that. I think where we've come to a lot as writers is we're so obsessed with word count, and we're so obsessed with hitting a specific word count, and we forgot how to write characters. And we're just kind of trying to get from one point of the book to the next point of the book. And the easiest way to do that is to tell the reader every single thing that happens to the character in the scene that we're in. And if we could dial that back to a point where we actually care about the characters we're writing, instead of just trying to get to that 70,000 mark so that we could start our next book. If we read George R.R. Martin, he doesn't give a crap when you get your next book. Yes, he's got millions of dollars, but like, if we stop focusing on how we can go full time and start focusing on how we could put out great books, we would stop worrying about telling the reader every last thing that our characters do and start actually getting them to love our characters.
And I think a lot of people write action beats like they would write a screenplay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying. They're trying to recreate an 80s action movie on the page. You know, they want that fancy gunplay and all that, so they try to get real descriptive with it and that sort of thing. And that doesn't always work in a book. The only time I think it works is if you're going for a specific moment and it really matters. Like I had to twist my left arm around so he came over my shoulder this way to fall off the building or whatever. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But like just over detailing the action sequences, I actually think, I agree, I think subtracts from the overall action scene experience. And so I think you're right about a lot of people just trying to hit those word counts, especially with this rapid publishing and the KU page reads. And I think a lot of people, especially just coming into it now, that's kind of you need to hit those big word counts for KU kind of thing. It's just that's the vibe that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Question for the panel. So what about like internal monologues or thoughts or other types of things that are not directly? Because I know some of the stuff I write, the character will be doing something, but then they'll like think what this means to them, or they'll remember something, or there'll be other things. I'm not saying it's always good. So what are your thoughts?
During the fight?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot to break up the monotony. The character, there'll be stuff that's not present in the moment, if that makes sense. And I wish I could think of an example, but I've seen that a lot, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I would tend to stay away from that.
As an editor, I take out 95% of people's inner dialogue. Like literally, I cut inner dialogue 95% of it. And especially because most people write it in the narrative and then have inner dialogue saying the same thing that the narrative just said. And so writers kind of hate when I get a manuscript back from me and they're like, where's all my inner dialogue? I'm like, it was totally unnecessary and it was just extra words.
I like framing style.
If it's, I was going to say that I like it.
That's fair. No, I mean, everybody's got their own opinions.
Your point about what's necessary to the scene, that's the whole main point for every action scene, or actually any paragraph that you write, any sentence that you write. is what does this scene need? What does this story need to move the story as a whole forward? You know, if it's a word that's not needed, cut it. If it's an internal thought, it's not needed, cut it. But internal thoughts can be helpful when they're reflecting on the larger story in the middle of an action scene to kind of help the reader have an anchor point in the larger story to figure out like where this fits with everything else.
Yeah, but if you're going for like, I mean, a real fast-paced action sequence, and suddenly you get the reader in that adrenaline kind of, and then suddenly they start waxing poetic about the meaning of life.
Oh, don't do that.
Disrupt that. It's going to disrupt that totally.
Like, it's kind of like first person. So like Larry Dresden and stuff, he can
Harry.
The Dresden dude.
Larry.
But he's
it's his twin brother.
Yeah.
Dresden, he reflects a lot on like moral qualms in the middle of
battle.
So let me clarify real quick. Maybe I didn't. I'm talking about specifically italicized inner dialogue. I believe that inner dialogue, 90% of it, you're writing point of view most of the time, right? Like, so like if I'm writing as Lauren, then I don't need to tell you what Lauren is thinking. The narrative tells you what Lauren is thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
So I take out almost all all those italicized internal dialogue that comes across really cheesy, because like we don't think sentences to ourselves ever in real life. Like I'm not sitting here going, man, I'd really like that cup of water. My mind does a thing and I go, hey, I've got water now. Right? Like, so like
dialogue, like when people talk either out loud for no reason or to other characters, because like, you know, in 99% of in an action sequence, like in a gun battle, there would be no time for any dialogue, but yet every movie, they have time for dialogue, and it would never, you know, a gunfight takes like 2 seconds.
Right.
So my only statement to your point of taking the inner dialogue out, and then I want to know what Kayleen has to say because she wanted to say something. But in an instance where something the character has like a clarifying moment, and so I'll just use an example. Two characters are going at it, and the character whose point of view we are reading from is on the losing end of this battle, and maybe he or she is pinned on the ground and the attacker is just going to town, like just beating the hell out of her, right? In her mind, she will have a clarifying moment. He is trying to kill me. So as having that inner dialogue, he's trying to kill me as I'm trying to explain to the reader something they already know, because we already know the dude's trying to kill him, but the character is having a clarifying moment at that point. And so having that point of dialogue in there, not to tell the reader anything, but it's triggering the character to, he's trying to kill me, I need to do something now. And just putting that little dialogue in there where he's trying to kill me, and then the action starts again. Not he's trying to kill me, I really need to save myself, because the I really need to save myself part is extraneous. We already know that. Of course you need to do that. But having that clarifying thought, because people do have those thoughts where this isn't just a game now, something's happening and I have to do something about it.
Right, but your narrative is in that point of view's head.
Right.
The whole time. So that italicized thing, what that does for me as a reader and as an editor is it pulls me out of the whole story, and it makes me go,
hold on.
Yes.
It sounds like you're talking to a fan.
Really? It's probably because somebody doesn't want to be heard. No, I'm kidding.
NSA, baby.
It didn't fix it.
It's not better. No, I'm not better. I'm awful, terrible. I'm dying, dead. I'm dead. I'll just shut up.
Horrible.
Skynet's coming.
No, still nothing.
Nope, still bad. So I'm really interested in Kayleen, what you had to say about the topic that we were talking about here.
I've kind of mostly lost my train of thought. I tried to hold on to it really tight, but I mostly agree, like, with everything you guys are saying. As far as breaking up an action scene, if there's something really important as far as the growth of the character or the growth of the plot, then taking a moment to sort of like pause, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing if it works for what's happening, and then it dives right back into to finish it out, be it an internal monologue, be it something that's outspoken, they're hidden in a corridor just taking like a moment to breathe,
so like if they're shooting, and then they take a break where they're ducking behind something and they have kind of a banter between each other. Is that?
So I can't remember what book it was. I was reading something, but the ship is being attacked, and actually I think it was yours, Josh. Yeah. The ship is being attacked, and they're like, fuck. And the son ends up being one of the people that's with the dad to go and like take care of the bad guys, but the dad doesn't know that until they're already in it. And there's like this moment where they're stuck behind all of these pylons of stuff, and the other people around him is like, could you guys like stop with the talking, we're being shot at. And he's like, fuck, all right, just keep your head down and stay behind me. And then they continue. Yeah. So you have this like small moment of character growth for the son, for the dad, and then we continue on.
Well, it's like that where Jared Hales found out his son is taken up arms, and there would be an ass chewing if you found out your 16-year-old son had gone into battle and was supposed to be. There would probably be a pause long enough to chew that kid's ass, or maybe
it's like he wanted to have the chew out, and then the mom gets on the phone, and we're just like, we can't do this right now. Okay, we're all just gonna die if we do this. So pause. We're gonna go fight, and then hopefully not die, so that I can then chew you out and try not to kill you myself. So, like that was like an ingratiated moment of action versus character growth, but didn't take away from the action. So those sorts of things. It carries you through. I like those parts. Those sorts of action scenes. I like those. Be it shoot 'em up, magic.
Well, if you've got a long action
themselves
scene,
in a tunnel.
Yeah, if you've got a long action scene, the little banter in there can kind of help to break it up and not drag. I mean, like the Lethal Weapon movies are a great example of that. Those guys had gun battles that lasted 10 minutes, but then they do a little snark back and forth every once in a while to sort of break it up while they figured out how they were going to get out of whatever situation they were in. So that's kind of it. But Corvo in the chat says, what about pulp? And I'm assuming he means the pulp, the two-fisted, 1920s type genre. And that goes back to the question. If you're writing something like that, there's a certain kind of action that's expected. And like, or superheroes, you write a superhero story. Well, that's a very definite, different kind of action, so.
And how do you dialogue a lot during those fight scenes?
And you can, the monologuing and all that stuff in superhero genre is just fun as hell to write. But where do you know where the line is between, say, a Tom Clancy thriller where one bullet will kill you, as opposed to something a little more forgiving, I mean, like the pulp era type stuff, or just the pulp adventure where you can take 4 or 5 shots before you go down, that kind of thing. I mean, how do you know where the line is between the genres?
Well, I think if you have a fight scene in a book, like we said at the beginning, it shouldn't be just for the sake of having a fight scene. So if you're having a fight scene where it takes one bullet to put somebody down, then that's the scene, right? Or if you have a heroic charge on an enemy, whatever, and he takes 5 rounds before going down, then that's the scene, right? Right. But you've got to do them differently, and they've got to matter for that point in the story.
J.K. Rowling said, book's not done when you've written as much as you could write. A book is done when you've taken out as much as you can take out. Huh. And I think that it's the same way of saying, tell the story with as few words as possible. And I think that if you're writing an action scene that does not do anything for the story, the action scene needs to go. Or you need to figure out what it does for the story.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So the consensus is don't shoot people unless there's a reason for it. And also drink whiskey, and you too can have chest hair like Chuck.
And make bad decisions.
And also make sure you have somebody they care about in the action scene. Otherwise, it's just pointless.
That's right.
Up the stakes.
Well, next week we're going to have another roundtable. Not sure what we're going to talk about. And then the week after that, it's Vegas. We will be in Vegas. We have the dinner locked down, and it'll be on the 6th, that Tuesday, from 6 to 10. And then if you're still stumbling around, then we'll find someplace else to stumble around at. But is that
where are we eating?
It's the I said dinner. It's a
shindig
on the terrace overlooking the garden.
It's a good word. You could word shindig. It's a shindig. There will be food there, but it's not a sit down dinner. The sit down dinner place was like $2,600, and I was like, no. So we're doing one at the hotel. They were very gracious and gave us actually it's a really kick-ass spot that overlooks the Sitter Atrium there. And Luke asked if we're doing a show from Vegas. I don't know if we're gonna do a show from Vegas. We'll see. There's gonna be 3-4 of us there. So maybe. We did a couple live broadcasts the last time we were there, so maybe we can do one this time. We'll definitely do like some kind of a live Facebook thing from the get together on Tuesday. So everybody that is a live viewer that is not going to Vegas will do some kind of a live broadcast on Tuesday night with everybody there, so you can see just how much you're missing and how much of a loser you are for not being there.
Is anyone checking out Chuck's really passive aggressive chatting over there?
This is a cool thing. Monday night. This is the Chuck Manley stare hour next to 2 Mondays from now, and he's just gonna sit there just.
I was thinking I'd take like a still of myself, just a still photo, and then screen share it and just leave it up for an hour and walk away.
Play like elevator music in the background.
He's like, I didn't even want to go to Vegas to hang out with them. I don't even like those guys. Who wants to hang out? Good times, guys. Everybody that came and hung out with us tonight, thank you very much for coming and chilling with us on a Monday. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. It's going to be fun. It's going to be rowdy, as always. David Weber has agreed to come back. Probably going to have him on a couple shows to talk about craft. He's very generous, so that'll be fun.
Also,
and then,
our longest show.
Our longest show ever. Do you think we could like push that? I wonder how long we could push that.
Yeah, because I mean that was like 9. It was
almost 2 hours.
It was almost 2 hours.
Yeah. I nearly had a medical emergency by the end of that. I'm just saying.
What's crazy is that it was almost 2 hours live, but then we went for another 45 minutes after that in the post show. So it was really cool. And he told us about some co-writing project that wasn't at that time. It might even be out now, but at that time it wasn't even submitted or anything. And he was telling us about it. So it was pretty neat. Everybody, thanks for coming and hanging out. Steve, appreciate you coming and hanging out with us tonight, brother.
Thanks for having me.
I like these big round tables. Like,
I think we should talk only about gunfights and alleys next.
Yes. I'll come prepared with all of the scenes to read.
I have 2 alley scenes in my work in progress right now.
Dang, I'm sorry, man.
but they're not like you're describing. They just happen to work out that way.
I think that you can leave them in, but they either have to have coyotes or yes,
magical chest hair.
Yes. Magical chest hair.
Oh God! Don't do that, Steve. Don't do that, dude.
As your chest hairs flicked from side to side, grasping at the legs of the
no.
They swayed in the wind.
And that's
don't ever talk about your chest hair and swaying again. Ever. Everybody, see you guys. Come back next week. We're going to talk about some writing. We're going to talk about some reading, and of course, everything in between. Right here on Keystroke Medium. Peace.
Later, folks.
Night.